Ladies and gentlemen, thanks to the hard work of our Model UN Club, advised by Mr. Moore, and thanks to a lot of community support, we're very fortunate today to have a special presentation from the Model UN Club and a very special guest speaker. Before we begin, I just want to remind you to please turn your cell phones off, put them away, silence them. Please take any earbuds out that you may have forgotten about. And now, without any further delay, please join me in welcoming our Model UN advisor, Mr. Gideon Moore.
Thank you, Dr. Davenport. Thank you, everybody. It's so good to see all of you together, this wonderful community gathered in one place to celebrate the accomplishments of your peers and to learn from an expert in the field who they'll be introducing later, a special guest speaker, Dr. Ira Helfand. Today's event is sponsored by the Model UN, and it's organized by the 17 students, juniors and seniors, who attended the World Summit of Nobel Peace Laureates. Now, I'm going to let the students explain to you what the World Summit is, what that means, but it's fair to say that going to this World Summit in Bogota, Colombia, was a truly life-changing experience. Before we get rolling, I'd like to take a moment to thank some people. First of all, I want to thank David Ives, Rhinebeckian, David Ives is the executive director of the Albert Schweitzer Institute at Quinnipiac University, and he was the one who invited us to go down to the World Summit, and we cannot thank you enough for the opportunity. The kids got so much out of it. Personally, I enjoyed it a great deal, as well as did Ms. Foti and Ms. Green, the chaperones. It was truly an eye-opening, wonderful experience. Thank you so much. Also, I'm pleased to share with the community that Professor Ives has invited us to return to the World Summit next year, and which is wonderful. And what that means for all of you in the audience, particularly for current juniors and sophomores, is that you will have the opportunity to apply and potentially attend the World Summit next year. So this presentation is something you should really give your full attention, because it's an extraordinary opportunity, and it's open to you, and hopefully this will be an ongoing tradition, so ninth graders too, I'm hoping in the future you'll get to go as well. And last thing before I forget about that, the application for the World Summit will be available tomorrow at midnight, not today, but tomorrow at midnight, so take a look and keep your eyes open for it. Second, I'd like to thank Susan Cummings-Findell, who is truly an angel, who through her foundation, Sunshine Comes First, that's sunshinecomesfirst.org, check it out. She was incredibly generous in allowing us to, and financially supporting our students going. I think it's fair to say that without Sunshine Comes First support, many of our students would not have been able to afford to go. So thank you so much. Third, I'd like to thank Dr. Davenport for his support. He was incredibly encouraging and helping me organize this and walk me through lots of challenges. Also, I'd like to thank the faculty, my colleagues, who have been really, really generous and flexible, because we've demanded a lot of time, including today. And thank you so much for supporting this program, which means so much to the kids. Finally, we have a special guest speaker today, Dr. Ira Helfand. I'd like to thank Dr. Helfand for being here today, and I'm going to let the World Summit students, who were the ones who invited him, give Dr. Helfand a proper introduction in a few moments. So without further ado, are you ready to roll? All right, give you Chris Johnson.
Hello everyone. We would like to begin our presentation with a little bit of a backstory on the Colombian conflict. The conflict has its roots in the 1960s. Due to the lack of a strong centralized government in Colombia, insurgency grew throughout the country, especially in the rural areas, because the government had neglected the rural communities for the better part of the 20th century. As the conflict worsened, two radical groups emerged, the FARC and the ELN. The FARC, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, which is obviously translated, is a group dedicated to rural insurgency and intent on overturning what it perceived as Colombia's systemic social inequality. Their goals were to represent the Colombian rural poor by seizing power through armed revolution and establishing a new government. The FARC conducted bombings, mortar attacks, murders, kidnappings, extortion, hijackings, the list goes on and on. And secondly, the ELN, the National Liberation Army, was a little bit more ideologically motivated than the FARC and conducted similar kidnappings and murders, but on a smaller scale. Their goals were to take over the government and replace it with one that was a little bit more representative. The extreme drug trafficking that Colombia was known for helped fund these leftist groups like the FARC and the ELN. But it's important to note that any sort of radical act, such as a kidnapping or a bombing, takes a toll on the society, and the Colombian society is no exception. They have endured about 50 years of conflict that has negatively affected the entire country. The total deaths caused by the conflict has reached 220,000, 81% of which were civilians. More than 11,000 people in Colombia were killed by landmines planted by the FARC, and 16,000 children were recruited by the FARC. I'll just let that sink in for a minute. The aim for peace in the country has been a goal of the government since the conflict began. One notable action that the government took to try to improve the situation was the creation of the United Self-Defense Forces of Colombia, known as the AUC. It was created in 1997. The government decided that there was a need for an umbrella organization of local and regional paramilitary groups to help combat the FARC and the ELN. But the most important step towards peace in the country was in September of 2016, when the president of Colombia, Juan Manuel Santos, and the rebel leader, whose name I am not going to even try to pronounce, signed a peace agreement that brought an end to the 50 years of conflict in the nation. This was a major step for the entire country. But it's important to say that when the agreement was voted on by the Colombian people, they rejected it, because they felt that it did not punish the rebels from the leftist groups, at least not to the extent that they had hoped. Think about it this way. If your life is surrounded by this terror, and you hear that it was possibly coming to an end, and those responsible were not punished, you would be angry. So it's understandable that they did not approve the agreement. Although the people did not approve the agreement, the government is still working with rebel groups to resolve the conflict. This is great progress for Colombia, and was why the conference was held in Bogota. Now, with that clarification out of the way, I turn it over to Michelle, who is going to talk to you about the conference.
And I'm going to talk about a conference. So the first summit took place in Rome in 1999, and it was held in Rome for the first 8 years of the conference. It was founded by Mikhail Gorbachev, and there's been 14 summits since then. In 2008, after it's been held 8 years in Rome, it was held in Paris for the 50th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was signed on December 10th, 1948. The main topic was to tackle important questions such as how to promote democratic values in the world and how to strengthen rights while removing social inequalities. In 2012, it was in Chicago, where they spoke about freedom and rights throughout the world. In 2015, it was held in Barcelona, and the focus was the world refugee crisis. Speakers were usually Nobel Peace Laureates or members of international NGOs that have accepted the Nobel Peace Prize. The Nobel Peace Laureates come together to address global issues and to encourage and support peace and human well-being throughout the world. This year, 25 Nobel laureates attended. Among those 25 is Jody Williams, the International Peace Bureau, UNICEF, and the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. We were part of the youth delegation, which is considered the most important delegation by the laureates. Its purpose is to inspire the youth to take action by by bringing laureates into small meeting rooms and talking about their struggles with oppression and how they tackled it in nonviolence and protesting, and teaching other people about how they lived and bring other attentions into the world around them. There were over 2,000 students from 28 countries that attended the summit, which were a part of the youth delegation. And only 45 of them were in high school. We were 17 of them, and 5 others were our close Norwegian friends. You can see in the bottom pictures there, most of the work that was done was primarily through talking with other students from around the world and talking about what they go through in their daily lives, and obviously issues that are going on in different places are not the same in the United States. So especially one of the biggest issues we talked about was gun control. A lot of other countries don't allow weapons of that caliber to be used by citizens. And a lot of people would come up to us and be like, how do you walk through the streets knowing that somebody could carry guns? So you sit there and you talk in circles and we discuss all these different things. And then you go and you talk to the Nobel laureates who have dealt with it in a much higher level than we have. And you would sit with other students and discuss how they took care of it and how you took care of it. And their hope was to inspire us to take more action and what we felt strongly about. So, Liza.
Hi, so I'm Liza Goldstone. I'm a senior here at Rhinebeck, for those of you who don't know. I'm going to be talking about the daily routine that we went through while we were at the conference itself. So I broke it into 3 slides, morning, afternoon, and night. So we'll start with the morning. So when we woke up, we would wake up really early, 5 a.m., 5:15, and we'd get up, get dressed. We were staying in the NH Metrotel hotel in Bogota. It was 3 people to a room. And we'd all get up together, and then we'd go down for breakfast, which was authentic Colombian food, really great different fruits and food that we'd never even heard of before. And then we would get on a bus from the hotel, which took us over to Corferias, which was the name of the conference center in Bogota where the conference was held. And in the morning there would be 3 panels, each an hour long, so 3 hours. And everyone in attendance, the youth and adults, both would sit in the audience, and then up on the stage, depending on the topic of the panel, education, poverty, global hunger, peacemaking, all these different topics they had, there would be experts on stage, many of them Nobel laureates themselves, and other representatives from global peacemaking organizations. So one panel that stood out to me was session 9, actually the last panel we went to, which was called Peace and National Dialogue, All Colombian Voices Together as a One. And here it was government officials and FARC officials on stage together discussing how they came to peace. They came to this point of peace and created the treaty and worked together. And these are just some quotes that I took notes on during the panel itself, and it was just really meaningful to all of us to hear from 2 people who had been fighting for decades to finally come together, and it instilled hope in all of us that, peace is possible anywhere. So then in the afternoon, after the 3 panels, we would break for lunch, and it was really exciting because we would go out of Corferias, and then there was a big parking lot, and they had food trucks come and park all around the parking lot, and you could go try whatever authentic Colombian food you wanted. They also had crepes and waffles, so there was really a lot of stuff. And then after lunch, we'd have smaller breakout sessions with the laureates. So this was maybe between 20 and 40 people in a room at one time. And you would pick which topic and which session you wanted to go to. So Two that I went to, one was with Shirini Badi, who's a Nobel Peace Prize winner, and she was the first female human rights lawyer in Iran. And then I went to another one about social entrepreneurship and social business, which was really exciting for me because I think a lot of times in America, we think of capitalism and the capitalist system as a means of just like getting rich and like the quickest way to get rich. But with social business, it's all these different people who are using their wealth and their business to make good for others. So lastly in the evening, we met a ton of youth from all over the world. There were people from Bogota, from Colombia. We hung out a lot with the Norwegian delegation, high schoolers from Norway, all these different people. And the conference creators had set up programs for us, the youth. Like they took us to the planetarium. We had concerts with famous Colombian singers. They threw us a pizza party in the basement of the hotel. And then we also had casual encounters, so just on the bus and around the conference center. So like I said, 3 students to a room, we were all on the same hotel floor, close-knit. Yeah, so that was our daily routine.
In case any of you don't know, my name is Rachel Picho. I'm a junior here, and I'm going to talk to you a little about who we actually got to see and hear speak at the conference. So in total, there were 28 individual laureates and Nobel Peace Prize winning organizations. Some of these individuals included Shirini Badi, Lech Walesa, President Santos of Colombia, Lord David Trimble, and many more. I think Michelle already mentioned some of the organizations that were there, which include UNICEF, Doctors Without Borders, International Physicians for the Nuclear War. So as a group of mostly women, we really enjoyed hearing these strong female laureates speak to us. This included Shirini Badi, who Liza mentioned. She's an Iranian judge who won the prize for her work in defending human rights, specifically those of women and children, and also defending democracy. She spoke Farsi at the conference, and so she needed a translator of her own. And it just served as the perfect example to teach us that peace truly does transcend speech barriers, because of course once her words were translated, the message was still the same. We also really loved hearing Jody Williams speak, who is an American activist. She spent her entire life working to ban landmines. She's also incredibly passionate about everything she speaks about, which I think was really inspirational for us to see, because it reminded us to just find something that we're passionate about and to fight for it with as much enthusiasm as she does. We also really admired Yemeni journalist, politician, and human rights activist Kawkal Karnan. She was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2011 for her work in integrating women into the peace-building process in Yemen, and also for defending human rights. She organized nonviolent protests in her home country of Yemen in 2011 that eventually became part of the 2011 Arab Spring movement. When she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, she became the first Yemeni, the first Arab woman, the second Muslim woman, and the youngest Nobel Peace Prize laureate to date, or Nobel Peace laureate to date. Of course, Malala has since broken that, but at the time she was the youngest. I think it was really wonderful for us to see her specifically speak, because it reminded us that there are still so many firsts and seconds and thirds that I guess we fulfilled, and as this young, change-making generation, we have the potential to do that. So other laureates we admired included Kailash Satyarthi, who actually won the Nobel Peace Prize at the same time as Malala. He was particularly articulate and seemed to know exactly what to say to appeal to his audience and to get his message across. We also admired Lord David Trimble, who had an acute awareness of world events and a refreshing sense of open-mindedness. We also admired Lena Bowie, who, like Jody Williams, was incredibly passionate. At one point, she essentially called out President Santos of Colombia, her equal, but she had no fear in calling him out, and she talked to the Colombian people in the audience and told them to hold him accountable and to demand everything they deserve. So now Lauren.
Hi everybody, my name is Lauren Platt and I'm a junior, if you don't know. I'm going to be talking about the history of Bogota and the free days that we were allowed to explore the city. So Bogota was first populated by a group of people that migrated to Mesoamerica, and with the arrival of the Spanish colonizers, the area was developed into a major settlement. In 1538, Bogota became the capital of the Spanish Empire provinces. And today, currently 8 million people live in Bogota. And it's considered a modern metropolitan city and a popular traveling location today. So the first place we went to when we arrived at 5 a.m. in the morning. We had a red-eye flight, so that went through the night. We were all extremely tired. We arrived at NH Hotel at around 7 o'clock in the morning, and all of the youth delegations were staying at the NH Hotel. So while we were checking in, we saw people from South Africa, we saw people from Japan, we saw people from Norway. It was just a really great way to create a network through meeting new people at the hotel, people we're going to be seeing at the conference, the orientation, people we were going to be seeing at night events. It was a great way to make new friends and connections all around the world. So then we got to take a nap because we were all so tired, and we had coffee and breakfast. We had authentic Colombian coffee. It was amazing. We all brought a lot home for our friends and family. And President Santos assigned us 2 undercover police officers so that we could explore the city, exchange money, in case there was a language barrier. Anything that were to go wrong, we would have help with us, and they could guide us around the city. It was a really great way to just get out on the streets and just dive into exploring the city. So the first restaurant we ate at was called Club Colombia, and during the 16th century, it was a Spanish colonial home, but during the 20th century, it was turned into a really famous restaurant. And we had a 3-course meal, all authentic Korean food, authentic Colombian food. I was in Colombia, and we had plantains with beet sauce. It was really good. We ordered a couple extra dishes of it. It was amazing. So the first day of the conference, it was an orientation of the Chamber of Commerce because they were funding the entire conference with all the laureates, which was at a different location, but we got to go to the building on the first day for orientation. We had a bunch of different NGOs speaking to us, people who had won Queen Elizabeth's Youth Awards. We had speakers from Kids' Rights. We had a whole just list of people who were speaking to us to kind of get us in the flow of what the conference was going to be like, a good orientation of meeting other young people internationally who have won awards. We also broke into smaller groups, and we got to meet a lot of Colombian students. We even danced to Shakira at one point. It was just a really good way to meet new people. I made a really good Colombian friend. We sometimes still talk, so it's really good. So the third day we had free, which was the second to last day of the week that we spent there. The first place we went to was Monserrate Mountain. It is 10,000 feet above sea level. We took a cable car that was around 8 to 10 minutes to the top, where there was a pre-Columbian church that was built in the 16th century. And it was really amazing because there's a church service going on, because it is a pilgrim destination for Colombian people, but it's also a tourist attraction. We got little goodies to bring back for people. There was Colombian hot chocolate. That was really good. And so after we went back to the famous district of La Candelaria, and we went to the Botero Museum, which was just created in 2000, where Fernando Botero, he donated 208 of his own personal collection to the museum, and they established a museum that was free of charge. Anyone can go in, anyone can look at all the artwork, and really admire the style of Colombian paintings that aren't really known as well internationally. So then we got to eat some street food, which more plantains and beet sauce, because that was everyone's favorite. And we went to the Museum of Gold next. They have 66,000 different artifacts of gold, like jewelry, pottery, artifacts, paintings, all incorporating gold because Colombia is known for their gold. That's what brought the conquistadors, and they're also known for their coffee. And so it was just really amazing seeing all the different jewelry that was on display, because they only have 5,000 on display. The rest they keep somewhere else and to preserve it. And the last day we had free, we spent a few hours at an extremely famous food market. It is one of the largest fruit markets in the world. I don't even recognize some of the things I saw. I don't know the name of it, but it was amazing because there were just so many different fruits, different vegetables. There was a whole meat section which we walked through, and we got to spend time with friends, and it was a good way to wrap up the trip. Just one more taste of Colombian culture. And then we went to the last famous restaurant, was called Andres, and they had 4 floors. The first floor was hell, the second floor was earth, the third floor was purgatory, and the fourth floor was hell. And they all had dancing, and they have a 75-page menu, which is insane. It took us an hour to pick something out, and it was really a good way to wrap up the trip. We got to say goodbye to friends because unfortunately we were on the plane going home the next morning.
Rhinebeck High School, and I'm going to discuss some of the lessons we learned from this amazing experience in Bogota. So one of the first and primary things that we heard is that you need to start where you are. So you don't have to solve the whole problem. You just need to find out what you can do and make that your job to do. And your job can be small. Start a focus group. Use social media to connect with others across the globe about a topic you're passionate about. Start talking and follow that talk with action. You need to figure out what is my duty and work hard to fulfill that responsibility, even if it seems small or inconsequential. Lema Bowie, one of our beloved Nobel laureates, said that our journey as activists will be like a baby learning to walk. At first it will be awkward and stumbling, but with patience, we will be able to get closer and closer to achieving our goals. We just need to get inspired, get informed, be brave, and act. Another lesson that we learned was that we need to start opening up dialogues. For good, lasting change that really works for everyone. In other words, for a real attempt at peace, we need to hear other perspectives, and we need to make sure our own perspective is heard. One of the things that was said at the conference was nothing about us without us. If our government, if the organizations that are impacting our lives are acting and doing things that will impact us, then we need to get involved in that. We need to make sure that the decisions being made about us are our own decisions. Jody Williams said the status quo has its own army, which is to say the things that we're used to in society, those ideas that are established, those are always going to be reinforced by the people that are used to them. So it's our job to fight for new ways of thinking when the old ones are outdated and wrong. Jody Williams also said we do not have the right to complain if we are not going to do something about it. So once we start opening up those dialogues, we have to follow that speech with action. And we need to empower our peers around the world to do the same, to find their voice and then to take action about it. The future can only be brighter if we do not repeat the same mistakes we have made in the past. And the only way to do that is by talking about them. Another important lesson, and definitely important and relevant for us, is that the youth of the world need to be ready to be responsible for change. And that's all of us. When people have lived a certain way for long enough, it becomes really hard to change, to break free of that. But we haven't lived that long. We still see things with fresh eyes, and we're still new to the world. We need to use that unique position to be critical of the world around us and creative in solving the problems we see. We also need to invest in other young people around the world, empowering them through education and giving them the tools that we all need to solve these problems. We are the most connected generation, and that's amazing. And a lot of people act like it's not amazing, but it is. We should be proud of that. And we need to use that connectedness to mobilize each other around issues that are important to us, because there can be no peace without the youth. These are some of the amazing things we heard, and I wanted to make sure that you got the chance to actually hear the words that were spoken to us by the laureates, because they're really, well, they're inspiring. Lema Bowie, again, beloved, said, if there's something that keeps you up at night that you want to change, that is your passion, and you need to pursue it. Find it and take action. And that can be anything that's important to you, and we all took that in different ways, and I hope you do too. Another thing we heard is don't be afraid of failing. Your failing can be the introduction to success. And don't forget the sacred anger. That's that anger that motivates you, that drives you to change whatever is making you angry, rather than driving you to just destroy. And lastly, being a feminist only means that you want equality among genders. Being an activist means that you care for the other and you fight for their rights. And this is important to us for us to remember, because we can all be feminists and we can all be activists. Lastly, peace will be triumphant. And that was the overarching theme of the conference. So those are our lessons. We're going to move to a short film that one of our delegates made to just show you some of our experiences.
All right, everybody, here we go.
My name is Sarah.
And I'm Grace.
Today, there is a multitude of global issues that need to be tackled. After returning from the World Summit, the 17 of us privileged to attend met and discussed which issues stood out as the most pressing and how we could translate the inspiring, lofty words we heard into constructive, targeted action. Upon brief reflection, we immediately recalled a startling lecture delivered by Dr. Ira Helfand on the importance, the necessity of banning nuclear weapons, 14,900 of which today exist and threaten. Dr. Helfand has been a passionate advocate, physician, and leader throughout his life. A graduate of Harvard College and the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, Dr. Helfand is the co-president of the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. The organization received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1985 for its work spreading information to create awareness about the catastrophic consequences of atomic warfare.
He was the co-founder as well as the past president of the Physicians for Social Responsibility. Additionally, he has published studies on medical consequences of nuclear war in New England Journal of Medicine and British Medical Journal, and has lectured widely around the world. He was the former chairman of the Department of Emergency Medicine and president of the medical staff at Cooley Dickinson Hospital. Currently, he is an internist and urgent care physician at Family Care Medical Center in Springfield, Massachusetts. We are thrilled and grateful to have Dr. Helfand with us today, not only to educate us, but to tell us how we can act. Without further ado, please welcome Dr. Ira Helfand.
Well, thank you for that introduction, and thank you all for coming to listen to me today. There's a debate amongst those of us who work on nuclear weapons issues as to whether this is an issue which can attract the support and attention of young people. Those of you who did not grow up during the Cold War didn't live through the very dark and scary days that the people of my generation did. And it's very gratifying to me to hear that of all the pressing problems that were discussed at Bogota, the need to abolish nuclear weapons was the one which stood out to your classmates who were there. And I want to talk to you today about nuclear war. This is not an easy thing to talk about, and it's not an easy thing to listen to. But I think it's terribly important that we understand exactly what the situation is in the world today, because we do face an extraordinary danger, an existential threat to our survival. And unless we understand that and act on it and force the leaders of our nations to change the policies which they're currently pursuing, some of the very terrible things that I'm going to describe to you today are actually going to happen. So let me start by just giving you a brief overview of the nuclear problem. As was just mentioned, there are about 15,000 nuclear warheads in the world today. This comes as a shock, I think, to many young people. When the Cold War ended in 1990, we, all of us living then, expected these weapons were going to go away. They had been built to fight the Cold War. And we thought that the problem had been solved, but they didn't go away. Our attention to them went away, but the weapons themselves did not. And so we deal with a situation where there are 15,000 nuclear bombs left on the planet. The vast majority, about 95%, in the arsenals of the United States and Russia. But there are 7 other countries that have nuclear weapons as well. And whereas in the past, we felt that it was only a big war between the United States and Russia that would threaten the whole planet, we now understand that even a very limited nuclear war, as might occur between some of the smaller nuclear powers, would also be a catastrophe not just for those countries that fought the war, but for the planet as a whole. Excuse me. We've done a study that looks specifically at the case of a limited war between India and Pakistan, 2 of the nuclear weapon states. For the purposes of our study, we made a number of very conservative assumptions, and we assumed that each of these countries used just 50 warheads, and that they were quite small, about the size of the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. And it's very important, if you have in your mind images of Hiroshima, which many people do, that we understand that these images do not begin to prepare us for the destruction that will take place today if nuclear weapons are used. Because the modern bombs that we have developed are much, much larger than the bombs which destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But we assumed just 50 Hiroshima-sized bombs used by each India and Pakistan against the other, and looked to see what that would do. The immediate effects on the ground in South Asia are unbelievably catastrophic. In the first week after this war, 10 to 20 million people died from the explosions, from the fires, from the radiation. To put that into context, during all of World War II, 50 million people died across the world, but that was over 8 years. And in this case, we would see a similar number of deaths occurring in one small region over the course of a single week. But as catastrophic as this destruction in South Asia would be, it's only a part of the problem. Because these 100 bombs burn 100 cities. They start firestorms in each of the cities that they attack. And the soot created by these fires goes up into the atmosphere, blocks out the sun, and triggers worldwide climate disruption that cuts food production across the entire planet, and which we believe would put up to 2 billion people, with a B, billion people at risk of death by starvation in the decade following this very limited nuclear war that used only about 0.03% of the world's nuclear arsenal. The death of 2 billion people over a decade would be unprecedented in human history. It would not be the extinction of our species. There are 7 billion of us around today. But it would be the end of our civilization. No civilization in human history has ever withstood a shock of this magnitude. And there is no reason to think that the very fragile, complex, interrelated international system which we live in would do any better. And so we have to understand that events totally outside of our control here in the United States, occurring half a planet away in South Asia, could have the most profound and catastrophic effects on us here, on the lives we hope to live. But that's a limited nuclear war. It's just a very small part of the problem that we face. Let's consider for a moment the danger of a large-scale war between the United States and Russia. And you know, since the end of the Cold War, for about 25 years, we have been told by our leaders that we did not need to worry about this anymore. That the US and Russia weren't enemies, that the danger of a large-scale war was simply off the table, something we didn't need to think about. Well, events over the last few years have made it clear that we still do need to think about war on this scale. The conflicts in Ukraine and in Syria, the increasingly bellicose rhetoric emanating from both Washington and Moscow have underlined the fact that conflict between these two countries is still a real possibility. And we know that if conflict takes place, it is almost certainly going to involve the large-scale use of nuclear weapons. So what would that look like? Let me start by just describing a modern attack on a large city. And again, it's important to remember that Hiroshima imagery just doesn't begin to describe what's going to happen. That was one bomb on one city, and a small bomb at that. A large-scale attack on New York would probably involve 15 to 20 bombs, each 30 to 50 times more powerful than the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. I'm going to use a model of a single explosion, even larger than these. The total explosive force of the 20 megaton bomb, 20 million tons of TNT, that I'm going to describe to you is somewhat greater than the explosive force you would actually see. The damage that I'm going to describe to you is actually substantially less than would take place if many smaller weapons were used. But I think it's an accurate model, and it helps us to understand the enormity of the danger that we face. Within a thousandth of a second of the detonation of this bomb, a fireball would form, reaching up to 2 miles in every direction, 4 miles across. Within this area, the temperature would rise to 20 million degrees Fahrenheit, which is hotter than the surface of the sun. And everything would be vaporized. The buildings, the people, the trees, the upper level of the earth itself would simply disappear. To a distance of 4 miles in every direction, the blast would generate winds greater than 600 miles per hour and blast pressures greater than 25 pounds per square inch. Mechanical forces of that magnitude destroy anything that human beings can build. Underground shelters collapse when exposed to pressures that are this great. To a distance of 6 miles in every direction, the heat would be so intense that automobiles would melt. And to a distance of 16 miles in every direction, the heat would still be so intense that everything flammable would burn. Paper, cloth, gasoline, heating oil, wood, plastic, it all ignites. Hundreds of thousands of fires which over the next half hour would coalesce into a firestorm, 32 miles across, covering over 800 square miles. Within this entire area, the temperature would rise to 1400 degrees Fahrenheit. All of the oxygen would be consumed, and every living thing would die. The bacteria and the viruses would die. The area would be sterilized of life. In the case of the New York City metropolitan area, we're talking about 12 to 15 million people dead in half an hour. And if this were part of a large-scale war between the United States and Russia, this same level of destruction would happen in every major city in both countries. A study which we published back in 2002 showed that if only 300 of the 1,500 nuclear warheads that Russia has got through to targets here in the United States, 75 to 100 million people would die in the first half hour. In addition, the entire economic infrastructure, everything we depend on to support our population, would be destroyed. There'd be no public health system, there'd be no internet, there'd be no electricity grid, there'd be no food distribution system. Everything would be gone. And in the months following this attack, the vast majority of the human race, the vast majority of the American population, those who did not die in the first wave of the attack, would also die from these indirect effects. But again, these kinds of consequences are only part of the story. The fires started by these weapons, used by the United States and Russia, would cause far greater disruption of the climate than the limited war in South Asia. In fact, the 150 million tons of soot pumped into the upper atmosphere would drop temperatures across the planet an average of 14 degrees Fahrenheit. In the interior regions of North America, in Europe, and Asia, the temperatures would drop 45 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit over a matter of days. And this cooling would persist for more than a decade. In the Northern Hemisphere, there would be at least 3 years without a single day free of frost. It means the temperature would go below freezing for at least some portion of every single day. And under those kinds of conditions, the ecosystems which have evolved simply cannot continue. The Earth would be colder than it has been at any moment in the last 18,000 years, since the coldest moment of the last ice age. Food production would stop. The vast majority of the human race would starve to death. And it is possible that we would become extinct as a species. This is not just some nightmare scenario which I have cooked up to frighten you today. This is the danger that we face every day as long as these weapons exist. And the danger is growing. We used to think only that we needed to worry about war between the United States and Russia. As I mentioned, we now need to consider also the danger of war in South Asia between India and Pakistan. The situation in Korea is demanding people's attention, and it's in the papers every day. We also face the danger of nuclear terrorism. We used to think the worst thing that a terrorist could do would to get hold of a small nuclear bomb and blow it up in New York or in Washington or in Moscow. We now understand the graver threat is of cyber terrorism. The danger that terrorists could break into the command and control systems of either the United States or Russia and cause nuclear weapons to be launched in large numbers. And we also, frankly, have to consider the increased danger that is added by the Trump factor. And I do not make this as a partisan statement. Wherever one thinks of the particular policies of the current administration, there is no question at this point that, as hundreds of defense experts in his own party said last year, the current president of the United States is not qualified by temperament or by knowledge to be in command of a nuclear arsenal. And his behavior since his inauguration has made this ever more clear. This is a profoundly dangerous moment. And the horrible catastrophe that I have sketched out for you is a real and present threat. But it is also important that we understand that what I have described is not the future that must be. It's simply the future that will be if we don't take action. Nuclear weapons are not like some force of nature or an act of God. We built these weapons with our own hands, and we know how to take them apart. We've already dismantled more than 60,000 of these warheads since the height of the Cold War. We know how to take the other 15,000 apart, and we can do this by the time you guys are finished with college. The only thing that's lacking is political will on the part of our governments and on the part of the peoples of the world to make their governments do the right thing. And that's the challenge that faces us. The great job, the great task of all of us alive on the planet today is to save this planet for future generations by preventing nuclear war and eliminating these weapons. And it's something that we can do if we're willing to act with dedication and with courage and with perseverance. Now, it is totally unfair for me to dump this on you today. You've had absolutely nothing to do with creating this problem. And in that very important sense, you are not responsible for it. But in a more important sense, you are responsible. Because if you and me and people like us around the planet don't take action, then the terrible things which I've described to you are going to take place. And everything that we have inherited from our ancestors, everything that we should bequeath to our children, is going to be destroyed. And so that's the challenge we face. And this is a very great burden I've placed on all of your shoulders today. Because once you know of these things, you have no choice but to take responsibility for ending the situation. But if this is a great burden, I think I'm also offering you all today something of a gift. Every one of you wants your life to matter. You want to do something good in this world. We have the opportunity to save the planet, and that is a very good thing to do. I think probably all of you are familiar with The Lord of the Ring. It's instructive. Nuclear weapons are the closest we've come on this planet to building a ring of power. And the elimination of these weapons is every bit as grand and urgent and heroic a task as the task undertaken by the Fellowship of the Ring. The only difference is that that fellowship was limited to a couple of hobbits and elves. Our fellowship requires the work of all of us. And I urge you all to take up this task. No one of you is expected to solve this problem by yourself. But every one of you has to do that part of the job which is yours to do. And you have to start by figuring out what that is. You have to look around yourself and say, what can I do to change the political climate in this country, to spread this information, and to create the kind of movement that existed a generation ago, when millions of people marched in the streets demanding that nuclear weapons be abolished. As bleak as the situation is in some ways, there is also some great cause for hope. A movement has taken root over the last 4 or 5 years around the world to call for the abolition of nuclear weapons. This movement, which is led largely by young people in the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, whose website I strongly urge you all to visit. This movement is culminating with negotiations which will take place at the United Nations next month and into the beginning of July for a new treaty to ban nuclear weapons, to make it illegal under international law for countries like the United States to have a nuclear arsenal. This is the biggest step forward towards the abolition of nuclear weapons in a generation. And it is an inspiring campaign, which, as I mentioned, has been led by people in their 20s and early 30s, and something which I think we can and all should support and join. So I call on all of you today to look at your lives, look at your friends, look at the community that you live in, and figure out what it is that you can do to contribute to this movement. I cannot promise you we're going to be successful, but there's every reason to hope that we will if we put our shoulders to the task. And what I can promise you is this: if you undertake this challenge, if you join this fellowship, sometime in the future you'll be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, I helped to save the world. And that's a very wonderful thing to be able to do. Thanks very much. More importantly, I'd really like to hear your comments that you might have about what we actually can, each and all of us do.
I have a wireless mic if anybody has a question for either Dr. Helfand or for the World Summit students. And you guys want to...
Is there anything that we can do to show our support at the UN conference, even if we're not directly involved because we're not part of the UN?
Yes, I didn't plant that question. There are several things. Most important, perhaps, there's going to be a march in New York City on Saturday, June 17th, the Women's March for Nuclear Disarmament, organized in the spirit of the women's marches that took place back in January. The details are available on the web, and it would be fantastic if many of you, or all of you, were able to join that demonstration that day. It's an echo of a huge demonstration that took place in Central Park in 1982 with 1 million people, largest demonstration in U.S. history. 1 million people marched to stop the Cold War arms race. A march which was largely successful and achieved that goal of ending the arms race at that time. So people, maybe a group of you could go as a group, but people individually also can go, and I think it's going to be very important. The other thing that would be very useful to do is to help draw attention to this. There's been almost a news blackout about this treaty negotiation in the U.S. press. If we lived in a different country, one would think that this has actually been an act of deliberate censorship. I don't think that's what's going on. I just think the press is kind of brain dead about this. They just don't understand the danger that we face, and they're just not paying attention to it. So, you know, the simple act of writing a letter to the editor of your local paper would be enormously valuable as the negotiations commence on June 15th. Maybe reporting the fact that a group of you are going to the demonstration on June 17th. So yeah, those are things that people can do to help support this process. And then once the treaty is negotiated, and I believe it will be signed on July 7th, the United States is not part of this negotiation process, and it does not plan to sign on to this treaty. We need to put pressure on the U.S. government and on the governments of the other nuclear weapon states, none of which are participating in these negotiations, to live up to the new norm in international law that this treaty is creating by signing the treaty and by taking the next steps to abolish their weapons.
Were you for, or, well, if you go back to World War II, would you be in favor of the nuclear strike that ended the war strikes?
You know, this is a question that comes up very often about, you know, was it right to use the bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Quick answer to the question, and then a point about the context. I think it's very clear from the historical record at this point that we did not need to bomb Hiroshima or Nagasaki. We had already destroyed dozens of cities in Japan with conventional weapons and firebombing. And the Japanese government was frantically trying to negotiate a surrender as we dropped the bombs. And it's pretty clear that we didn't drop the bomb to end the war. We dropped the bomb to impress the Soviets and to scare them. But I think the more important thing is that whatever one thinks about that particular historical question, the situation in the world today is fundamentally different. The U.S. got away with dropping those 2 bombs. We killed perhaps 300,000 people total, but it did not cause the end of the world. If nuclear weapons were used again today, it's not going to be 1 or 2 bombs. It's going to be a large-scale war with many bombs. And the people who use those bombs are going to die too. And that's one of the problems that we really need to understand. Through much of human history, having big weapons kind of made us safer. And it's deeply part of our psychology to feel and think that way. I mean, if you're walking down a dark street and you see someone coming at you and they've got a stick, and you've got a bigger stick, you're a little bit safer. But nuclear weapons are different than that. As I mentioned, the use of just 100 very small nuclear weapons would end modern civilization. These have become suicide bombs, and we have to understand that that's the situation that we're in today. If we use these weapons, our own weapons, successfully against an enemy, we're going to be committing suicide. And I think the Hiroshima-Nagasaki question has to be, always that debate has to be thought of in this context. The world is fundamentally different than it was when that decision was taken. To use these bombs, no, I said no, we shouldn't use them. The war was over. The Japanese were trying to surrender before we dropped the bomb.
So, you were earlier saying that we should make it illegal by international law for a country to possess nuclear weapons, but what about the countries that don't obey international law?
So, that unfortunate moment is many, including the United States, which refuses to recognize the jurisdiction of the World Court, and which, like all the nuclear weapon states, is violating the provisions of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which requires all the nuclear weapon states to negotiate the elimination of their nuclear arsenals. We've been a party to that treaty since 1970 and have never taken that obligation of the treaty seriously. It's a difficult situation. The United States cannot disarm unilaterally. All the new countries that have nuclear weapons have together to make this decision. And looking at it, you can imagine people saying, this isn't going to happen. This is incredibly difficult. A couple of things. One, we know that we did make important steps in this direction during the Cold War, at a time when the United States and the Soviet Union were bitter enemies and were armed to the teeth and building more nuclear weapons every day. Rationality interposed itself, and in response to a huge movement among the general population, the leadership of both the Soviet Union and the United States fundamentally changed their position on nuclear weapons, signed a series of treaties limiting the arms race, stopping the building of new weapons, and providing for the elimination of many of the weapons that existed. And those treaties were enforced and verified to a degree that both countries were quite satisfied that the other side was complying. So we know that even countries which are bitter enemies can, if they come to understand the urgency for their own national security of getting rid of these weapons, can reach agreements, and they can abide by those agreements. This is not going to be an easy process. The treaty that is ultimately negotiated between all the nuclear weapon states that sets forward the timetable for dismantling their nuclear weapons is going to be a complicated document with very tough verification provisions, very tough enforcement provisions. And it's not going to be an easy treaty to negotiate. But we can do that, and we really don't have an alternative. If we don't do that, we don't really have a future at all.
Gender equity. Are there any women who'd like to ask a question?
I was wondering if you think that you said President Trump is like really belligerent and unpredictable. Do you think that's maybe an effort to distract the media from this issue?
I think there's been a great effort to keep the media from focusing on this. The United States boycotted all of these negotiations and the conferences leading up to the negotiating process. I think there's a real desire on the part of the countries which have nuclear weapons to suppress the information that I shared with you today. This is a profoundly inconvenient truth for countries that want to have a nuclear arsenal. You know, we like to think here in the United States that we only have nuclear weapons in order to deter other nuclear powers from attacking us. That's not true, and the US government is pretty straightforward about that. If you look at the 2010 Nuclear Posture Review, it states very clearly that deterring nuclear attack is one of the missions of our nuclear arsenal, but it's only one of the missions. We use these weapons all the time to project national power, and all the other nuclear weapon states do too. We use them to bully non-nuclear weapon states. We in the United States have threatened to use these weapons against non-nuclear countries on many occasions since Nagasaki. We threatened to use them against China when it was in the nuclear power we had in Korea. We threatened to use them in Vietnam. We threatened to use them during the Iranian Revolution in 1978. We threatened to use them against Iraq, both in the first Gulf War and in 2003, the second Gulf War. And there have been other occasions as well. Our leaders have viewed these quite incorrectly as useful instruments of national power. And it totally undermines that whole policy if you look at what the weapons actually do and understand that if we actually go ahead and use them, we're going to be destroying our own country. And so I think there's a great desire on the part of those who favor the maintenance of the nuclear arsenal that we not look too closely at this issue and that people not speak out on this. And it makes it all the more important that we do those things.
So to what major success have previous agreements had into curtailing the production of nuclear weapons? And what measures does the United Nations and other international bodies have to enforce these laws? Like, other than sanctions, what can we do against North Korea?
Well, the means that we have depend some of the treaties that we're talking about. So, for example, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which requires the nuclear weapon states to get rid of their nuclear weapons, doesn't have an enforcement mechanism for this, and so it's not being enforced. The next treaty, the one in which the nuclear weapon states actually set forward a timetable for eliminating their weapons, is going to have an enforcement mechanism. The situation in North Korea is particularly difficult at the moment. We have used sanctions. I think we've used sanctions somewhat lopsidedly without also pursuing diplomacy. And I think it's important that we understand and remember that there have been times when we have had a much better handle on the situation in North Korea than we have today. In 1994, the United States and North Korea almost went to war over the North Korean nuclear weapons program, which was in its infancy at that time. And Jimmy Carter, as a private citizen, former President Carter, flew to North Korea without even telling the Clinton administration he was doing this, and began sort of citizen diplomacy type negotiations with the North Korean government. As a result of that, the US and North Korea engaged in a dialogue, a diplomatic dialogue, over the next 6 years. The North Koreans suspended their nuclear weapons program. They shut down their major reactor for making weapons-grade material. And we were well on our way towards reaching a definitive agreement with North Korea in 2001 when George Bush became president and stopped these negotiations, stopped this diplomatic conversation. We have not tried the diplomatic route again in a significant way since then. The North Koreans have been extremely explicit that they will give up their nuclear weapons in exchange for guarantees that we will not overthrow their regime as we overthrew Saddam Hussein in Iraq and Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. It's a tough thing to do. This is a terrible government which does terrible things to its people. And I think nobody wants to do anything that perpetuates that regime. But if the alternative is a war in Korea and Japan involving nuclear weapons and massive death, then that's probably a step that we as a country ought to take. And we need to at least be exploring that diplomatic possibility, which we're not at this time.
I think we have time for like 2 more questions, if that's okay.
What would the abolishment of nuclear weapons do to the balance of power in the world?
Hard to know for sure. The balance of power in the world is changing dramatically every day. And certainly the balance between the major powers is going to need to be taken into account as we get rid of these weapons. One of the arguments that's put forward by people who want to maintain them is the idea that these weapons have somehow maintained the peace over the last 70 years, since the end of World War II. And I think in considering that argument, we have to look at a couple of things. One, it hasn't been a very peaceful 70 years. There hasn't been a generalized war in Europe like World War I and World War II. But there have been wars all over the world that have killed tens of millions of people. This has not been a time of peace in the nuclear weapons era. Number 2, there have been other periods of significantly greater political military stability, most notably in Europe between the end of the Napoleonic Wars in 1815 and the beginning of World War II in 1914. 99 years of basic peace in Europe, not because of nuclear weapons, but because of diplomacy and the desire of the countries at that time to make sure they didn't go to war again. So, yeah, getting rid of nuclear weapons doesn't get rid of all the problems on the planet, There are still going to be issues of war and peace. There are still going to be issues of dealing with climate change. There's still going to be issues of dealing with how do we feed a growing population in a world with finite resources. But if we get rid of the nuclear weapons, if we avoid nuclear war, then we're around to deal with these other problems. And quite frankly, if we don't get rid of these weapons, we don't have to worry about the other problems because we're not going to be here to deal with them.
I think you've made your opinion on nuclear weapons very, very apparent, but I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on nuclear power? Namely, do you think that it's a viable energy alternative for the future?
There are many things one can say about nuclear power. For me, the most important is that nuclear power is really an engine of nuclear weapons proliferation. I will present it in just a second. There is, every country that has a nuclear reactor has the ability to build nuclear weapons. And if we say that at the very least we don't want to see the proliferation of nuclear weapons, then we don't want to have nuclear power plants built all over the world. I think the most important thing to say about nuclear power in terms of its role as an energy source is that it is extravagantly expensive, way more expensive than other forms of generating electricity. And that spending resources on nuclear power takes resources away from the renewable sources that we urgently need to develop in order to get away from fossil fuels. And nuclear power is put forward as an alternative to fossil fuel generated electricity. But we can generate far more electricity if we spend the money that we're spending on nuclear on wind and solar and conservation. And in fact, every dollar that we spend on nuclear is diverting from those other much more important ways of dealing with the fossil fuel crisis.
I think we have one last burning question, and then we'll wrap up.
So, assuming that we get rid of nuclear weapons as a whole in the United States, what happens to those resources and the materials that were put towards nuclear weapons? Where do they go? What do we do with them?
Yeah, it's a big problem. You know, the plutonium that we've made, plutonium is not a naturally occurring element. The plutonium that we've made to build nuclear weapons is intensely radioactive and very carcinogenic, and is a public health threat for about 500,000 years. It's a pretty spectacularly arrogant thing to do, considering that human civilization has been around for about 5,000 years, to create this public health threat that's going to last for 500,000 years. We have not figured out an ultimate solution what to do with this stuff. There's no national repository, permanent repository for nuclear material, and there's not one on the horizon. And this is a task that we're going to need to still figure out. But what we do know is that the most dangerous configuration for this plutonium and highly enriched uranium to be in is molded into a nuclear weapon that can explode that's mounted on top of a missile. And so the first step is to get the weapons taken apart, to separate out the plutonium, the highly enriched uranium, into a configuration that will not explode, and then to figure out how we store this stuff for the next 500,000 years. Let me just close with a couple of quick observations. As I said before, this is not a problem of your creation, and I do apologize for half of my generation for not taking care of this problem yet. I don't think this is a problem you all are supposed to solve in your generation by itself either. I think people in my generation have an enormous responsibility to work on this and to try to clean up this mess before we leave the scene. But I do think this is something that we all need to work on together. Sometimes thinking about nuclear weapons, it's easy to be overwhelmed. The prospect of the destruction that I've talked about, it's way outside of our normal experience. And as we go about our daily lives, it's springtime, you go outside, on most days, not today, but on most days it's beautiful out. And you look around and your whole life's ahead of you. And it's just impossible to think this could all go away. I was talking this weekend at my 50th high school reunion and was discussing a trip I had to the Holocaust Museum a few years ago in Washington. And it's filled with a lot of exhibits that are kind of like the stuff I've been talking to you about today. Very somber, very scary, very depressing exhibits. Pictures of people the survivors of the camp, the mass graves, and so on. The exhibit there that, to me, was the most powerful was not like that. It was a little alcove that was filled with several hundred photographs, all taken in this one little village, Jewish village in Poland, in the 1930s. And they were just normal photographs of people going to school, weddings, bar mitzvahs, friends sitting in cafes and beer gardens and things like this. And you look at these people, and you know what happened to them. They didn't know what was about to happen to them. And it was incredibly powerful, just sort of seeing not the concentration camps, but the normal life that was interrupted and disrupted by the Holocaust. As we look around our world, we somehow have to make that kind of leap of imagination and understand that all the great stuff that there is out there for us to enjoy in life, it can't all go away if we don't work to make sure that it stays. In the Hebrew Bible, there's a passage which God's reported to say, "Behold, I have set before you life and death. Choose life, that you and your children might live." That is the choice before all of us today. And we all have to work really hard to make the right choice, and then to act with courage and determination on that choice, so that indeed every one of you can grow up and have children and grandchildren, so that your children can grow up and have children. There's a wonderful future ahead of us. We just do the things that we need to do to preserve this planet. And I hope you will all be part of that effort, and I kind of suspect most of you will. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Helfand. That was fantastic. We need to wrap this up. We've only got about 5 minutes left. Could the other World Summit delegates who didn't have a chance to present today please stand up just to be acknowledged? This was a team effort, this presentation. Again, I'd like to thank Professor David Ives and Susan Cummings-Fennell for being here. And thank you, all of you, for giving us your attention. And if you could please return to your 9th period classes for dismissal. Thank you very much.